On this episode of Phinsde The NFL, I am joined by the great Warren Sharp of Sharp Football Analytics, and we are going to discuss the Miami Dolphins in this 2025 preview of them. We're going to discuss if the offensive line is what's holding Miami back from being great. We're going to discuss the run game, Tua, McDaniel, the defensive front seven, the secondary, and so much more. So lock in. Smash that like button, subscribe if you are new, and as always, let's get into this one.
Loses the football. Touchdown! Got it!
You have got to be kidding me.
Jalen Waddle has a Dolphin touchdown. And he will score!
Field on the near side, man open, touchdown!
The run from Tua Tagovailoa.
Touchdown!
He's going deep. He's got it for the touchdown again.
Tagovailoa trying to make up for it. Fires to the end zone. Touchdown!
Beautiful day to be a Dolphin fan.
Let's go!
What's good, Fin Nation? Welcome back to another one as we are joined by Warren Sharp of Sharp Analytics to talk a little Miami Dolphins football, as Warren Sharp has gone ahead and released his 2025 football preview. It's fresh off the presses, so we're going to discuss that and a whole lot more. Warren, thanks for taking a few moments out of your day to join me here today.
Yeah, for sure. Look, the Miami Dolphins, I know you guys want more out of this team. I know you guys obviously are dealing with a lot from the national media, don't believe in your quarterback, don't believe in your roster itself. And so there's some positives and negatives about the Dolphins in 2025, and certainly happy to talk through them with you guys here momentarily. As you mentioned, just finished that 586-page 2025 football preview. I've got the hard copy, just got the hard copy in the mail the other day. This takes a lot of work to put together. And for your audience, I just want you to know, we're going to do a PDF run of this for just $1. It's normally $30 up on the website, but if you enter the code Dolphins over at sharp.football, everybody listening can get it for just $1. So you're not going to get a better preview. It's the best bang for the buck out on the marketplace, literally and figuratively at that discount. And I'm sure we're going to cover a lot of this stuff about the Dolphins in here, but if you're interested in the 31 other teams, this book is really going to help you out, whether you're playing fantasy football or betting on the games. It's definitely a go-to resource, both before the season starts as well as throughout the season.
Or even if you just want to scout the Miami Dolphins' upcoming opponents throughout their schedule as a fan, as one of the hardcore fans. But I highly recommend it. It's a great read. I was actually looking through it before we linked up here. So it's absolutely fantastic work. A lot of blood, sweat, and tears went into it, like you said. So go support, go use that promo code that Warren's provided, and go show him some love, because the type of sweat equity that goes into that type of work, it deserves to be repaid back by football fans, right? The more eyes, the better. So let's talk about this. And let's start off with Tua, because you're right. First of all, listen, I've actually been following your website for quite some time. I started this channel in 2020, so I've been actually following you for quite some time. And let's start off with this before we dive into the numbers and the opinions and everything. I'm going to ask you a simple question. Do you remember such a polarizing quarterback when it comes to like how Tua Tagovailoa is not only treated by the national media, but I'm sure you see it too on social media, even by some in his own fan base, especially for the whole beggars can't be choosers thing's got to come in here a little bit, because we've been starving for a great quarterback play since Dan Marino, and he was our first Pro Bowl quarterback in 30 years. I mean, all the numbers in terms of passing yard leader, all the kind of stuff, completion percentage, everything, passer rating. Are you shocked at how polarizing of a figure he is, because Warren, quarterbacks over the test of time have had their injury issues, so that's nothing new. Where do you stand with just that fact on Tua Tagovailoa and how polarizing he is?
It's frustrating, quite honestly, and I don't think enough people are even talking about it. That's why sometimes when I post about it, some of those tweets end up doing pretty strong numbers. It's because I don't think even some of the fans in the Dolphins fan base are aware of statistically what he has been delivering to your offense. And when I look back at, I wrote this in the book. There's only, what is it, 3 other quarterbacks in the NFL who have delivered a winning record in their starts every single of the last 5 years that they've played. Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Tua Tagovailoa. And as you mentioned, he's not been out there all the time because of injuries. But do you know that Tua ranked number 4 in EPA and number 3 in success in 2024, number 2 in both of those stats in 2023, number 2 and number 5 in those 2 stats in 2022. I mean, I don't think that the Miami Dolphins fan base even recognizes just how impactful his presence is out on the field, statistically, what he delivers, whether you're looking at deep passes, whether you're looking at accuracy. And so I think that there's definitely been a darker cloud over Tua. From a national perspective, but also within the Dolphins fan base themselves. The issue to me, and I wrote about this in the foreword of my book, that frustrates the hell out of me is there are so many quarterbacks around the NFL that, I mentioned some of these other quarterbacks, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson. I'll even throw in Joe Burrow. I know you guys have a little bit of rivalry with Justin Herbert. I'm not going to include him in this conversation, but if you look at Burrow and you look at Josh Allen, you look at Lamar Jackson, these are elite quarterbacks. Like I'm talking about, I don't want to say once in a generation, but quarterbacks that are at the pinnacle of the sport and are delivering well-rounded play. And because they haven't won a Super Bowl, everybody just throws stones at them, picks apart the nits and the little problems in their game and wants to magnify those and just talk about, well, the Dolphins aren't the Dolphins aren't winning because of Tua, or the Bengals aren't winning because of Joe Burrow, as opposed to crediting those players with everything they're giving and acknowledging the fact that the Dolphins aren't winning because of all these things that Tua has to deal with and overcome, or all these other things that are going on that Joe Burrow can't control, or all the issues that Lamar Jackson is dealing with, or Josh Allen is playing incredible, absolutely incredible football. I know he's a rival of yours, but he's playing incredible football, but their defense has been holding the team back. We can't talk about all the positives about Josh Allen and blame things on other aspects of the Buffalo Bills. We're just throwing stones at Josh Allen himself. And that bothers me because these are some of the best quarterbacks in the NFL playing at the pinnacle, and no position matters more towards wins than this quarterback position. Meanwhile, you got quarterbacks around the league. I don't want to throw too many names out there, but you look at guys like Kyler Murray or some of the other first overall draft picks who have really struggled. Trevor Lawrence, another quarterback down from the state of Florida, struggled massively. Like, is actually part of the reason why the team is losing games, because their play is so subpar, and yet we don't talk about him. And he was the most heralded quarterback to enter the NFL. He was viewed as like this generational quarterback. Kyler Murray was drafted. Since luck. Kyler Murray was drafted number 1 overall. And yet we don't talk about these guys who have actual deficiencies, like pretty massive deficiencies in their games. But we want to throw stones at like the guys that are really good, but just small problems. And I think of that grouping, Lamar, I don't want to call him the most polarizing because a lot of people realize his greatness, but people do like to hate on Lamar. Josh Allen, Joe Burrow. But of that trio, I think then you add Tua as the guy who you had a great word, the most polarizing, because I just think he gets hated on the most by national media. And the funniest part is, I would venture to guess 25 other starting quarterbacks around the league, plus all the backups, of course, would not be able to have anywhere near the level of success on the Dolphins that Tua brings to the table, because of that special skill set of what he's required to work with a absolutely ridiculous offensive line that he has to get the ball out so quick from a timing perspective, on time, super fast, and accurately. And that's what Tua brings to the table. And that's why you guys have such poor records anytime he's not out on the field, because you can't replicate what he brings to the table.
Listen, I know you're a numbers guy, and and what you said about backups not being able to basically hold the weight. I mean, we saw, people forget how good was Teddy Bridgewater under Sean Payton backing up Drew Brees when Drew Brees went down and Teddy had to come in. He was phenomenal. Comes here, he just can't operate the offense anywhere near to the effectiveness and the efficiency that Tua does. But you're a numbers guy, so let me throw something out. If you remember last year, before the hip pointer kind of ended his season, which, that in the concussions weren't on the offensive line, but that hip pointer, that hit he took against San Francisco, that was on the offensive line. But let's talk about when he first came back from the concussion. In his first 6 games when he returned from that concussion, he threw for 1,642 yards, 13 touchdowns, 1 interception. He had a 77 completion percentage, and he had 116.3 passer rating. Guess what? The Dolphins went 3-3 in that stretch. All right. You go to the Buffalo game. All right. When we were in Buffalo in 2024, I mean, Tua Tagovailoa's EPA per dropback was 0.62 versus the Bills that week. At that point in the season, that was the 9th highest single game EPA per dropback for any quarterback so far up until that point. Guess what? Out of all those 9 quarterbacks, he was the only one who lost. And you look at it, right? And what was the reason why? Well, the defense, I mean, they had a EPA that was the 22nd worst EPA per play showing by any defense against a Sean McDermott Buffalo Bills team. And the special teams EPA, which was minus 7.79 in that game, was the 7th worst single game performance against Buffalo since 2017 in about 123, contests. So Tua goes out there and he puts the 2nd best single game total EPA on a passing play EPA standpoint ever against the Sean McDermott defense, and it's still not good enough to overcome the deficiencies that were around him. And I think what you really honed into, and I think what gets forget a lot about with all these quarterbacks, there's 52 other players on a roster, and there's a coaching staff that impact the outcome of their games. And it's just it's the quarterback. That's where it stops and starts with, you know what I mean? And I think kind of everything gets lost in that. But you brought up the offensive line, and you had a tweet with your Tua Tagovailoa tweet, and you said something that was very, very interesting in that. And you said that, this offensive line is the 6th cheapest by money invested in the last 3 years. And you also talk about how this offensive line has seen the number 3 amount of least draft capital invested into it in the last 3 years. And I know you're probably not super high on this offensive line heading into this season. I mean, I believe you ranked them, what was it, 26th, I want to say. And you talked about Jonas Savaiinaia being added as well as James Daniels, but the depth is an issue. Where are you at with this offensive line in Miami? Do you think, once again, this is going to be the determining factor? Because we can get into the running back analytics you've got and the short yardage analytics you've put out. A lot of that is due to this offensive line not even being able to get a push for 1 yard. Where are you standing with this offensive line?
Yeah, it's unfortunate because on paper, I think it's actually worse than what your line was last year. And your line was obviously terrible last year. We did rank them 28th is our projected ranking. Yeah. Very close to your 26th. 28th heading into this upcoming season. And, for so long, the Miami Dolphins have not really needed to care about the line as much as some other teams because of the super quick release of Tua and the way that Mike McDaniel has designed this offense to just get rid of the ball so quickly. They felt like, well, we don't necessarily have to invest the draft capital, as you mentioned, 30th in draft capital the last 3 years. We don't have to invest the cash, 27th in spending on the offensive line. Let's put it into some of the other positions and some of the skill positions, etc., because Tua is just going to get rid of the ball so quickly. Well, the trickle-down effect has been that, Tua has taken some hits. Tua has been injured a little bit at times. Can't get rid of the ball super fast on 100% of the dropback. So there are going to be times when he's going to take some hits. Your projected tackle, if you're going with Paul, he ranked 82 out of 85 starting tackles last year by PFF, and Austin Jackson ranked 80th out of 85 starting tackles last year. So Paul and Jackson are 80th or worse out of 85 tackles in performance last season. You obviously lost Armstead. And your point about the run game, football, and especially in the Shanahan style of offense with Mike McDaniel, very complementary run game, pass game. You've got to have some balance. You've got to work off of the run if you're going to have success throwing the football as well. And that offensive line is just so cheap, lack of talent, and obviously does sustain injuries at times, like all offensive lines do. They rank dead last in running back stuff rate in terms of the frequency of runs that do not produce a single gain at all, get stuffed at the line of scrimmage. You guys had the highest rate of stuffs by your running backs. 31st in short yardage conversion rate. That is primarily a statistic that's on the offensive line. They have to get push in order for your running back to convert a 1 yard gain. And your running back, sometimes you can be a bulldozer like a Derrick Henry, and maybe you're going to fall forward or knock somebody over and get that yardage. But most often that offensive line has to get a little bit of push to help your running back out. Vision helps, obviously, speed to the whole things of that nature, but you got to get a little bit of push. They did not have it. They ranked 26th in yards before contact per rush attempt. Again, that's primarily an offensive line based statistic. And they ranked number 1 in most offensive holding penalties. They had the most offensive holding penalties last year since 2019 of any offense. So, this line has struggled. It's been a problem for you guys over the last couple of years. You haven't invested in it. And now I expect it to be a problem for 2025 as well, which is, that has to, if you're a fan of the Dolphins, A, frustrate you, but B, if you're an analyst looking at what's the ceiling of the Miami Dolphins, you got to bring the ceiling down a little bit because of that offensive line.
Yeah, I'm looking at your list right now. I got the 26 and the 28 mixed up 110%. So I apologize for that. But you had a little excerpt in there that was very interesting too, where you talked about how Miami running backs were contacted at or behind the line of scrimmage on 50% of their carries last year. And then when you tweeted out a few weeks ago, you said rate of running backs being stuffed for no gain in short yardage. The Dolphins and New England Patriots tied at 44%, the highest in the NFL. I mean, you look at how this is designed too. Let's be real here. Austin Jackson's hurt more than Tua Tagovailoa. Paul is a massive unknown, right? I mean, he only had like some good film last year against the Houston Texans. Other than that, it wasn't that great. And then, Aaron Brewer, I think we've got a competent center in that. I got faith in Jonas Savai-Nye. I loved him coming out of Arizona. I was very high on him coming out of Arizona. But then James Daniels, he's coming off an Achilles injury. What's he going to be? Is he going to be the guy who's playing really well before the Achilles injury? Or is he going to be a guy that looks like he's coming off an Achilles injury? Because then you start getting back into what we had last year, Warren, the Liam Eichenbergs, the Robert Jones, the guys who have no business starting NFL games right now. And you kind of talked about, the complementary aspect of the offensive line and, with the running backs, and, we covered that and we'll get into that a little bit more, but you also brought up something very interesting there, the penalty yardage. And, you put out the numbers from last year that the Miami Dolphins had 465 total offensive penalty yards. But one thing I wanted to specifically ask you about was when you went over the most accepted penalties the last 2 years, and you put this tweet out in May. And I will never forget this, reading this. And you put him out. Juwan Taylor led the NFL in 31 of the most accepted penalties. Larry Tunsil had 26. He was number 2. But anyways, the whole list that you put out was all tackles, corners, and guards. And then you had a few edges sprinkled in there. And really, the only one offensive skill position player on that list was Julian Hill. And that is a guy they've let Jonnu Smith go because this franchise really believes, and the staff really believes in Julian Hill. We've talked about how detrimental the blocking can be to skill positions, man, I mean, you look at the numbers, how detrimental can a undisciplined offensive line be to your offense as whole?
Yeah, look, a holding penalty, there's statistics based upon, and I can look up how frequently drives score points when there is a holding penalty. I don't have that at the tip of my fingers, but I have looked up in the past how frequently an offensive drive scores points when there is a sack allowed. And sacks, we would call them drive killers. Because you drop 20 to 20 plus percentage points in your odds of scoring on a drive if you allow a sack. Now, a holding penalty, generally speaking, is going to take more yards than most sacks. Most sacks aren't taking 10 yards, but you do get that extra down. So I'd have to see the difference in the percentages there. But holding penalties or any type of self-inflicted wound is a massive issue for an offense, because the way that the rules are set up, as you know, they are to favor offenses. The NFL would love to see a little bit more scoring. And so if you are giving chips back, like you're getting all these chips, the league is giving you all these chips for that offense. The offense needs to hold on to all those chips, use them, play them smartly. If you're having self-inflicted wounds, or you're being too predictable offensively, or you're making dumb decisions or dumb play calls or dumb penalties, you're just giving chips back to the dealer, just saying, okay, we don't need these. We'll try to win without having these extra advantages. And so those self-inflicted wounds are a big part of that. And the Miami Dolphins are clearly one of the teams that have far too many on that offensive side of the ball, and absolutely got to clean them up.
Yeah. Now we talked about the running back room. I find it interesting that, you'll put out the statistics that basically show how detrimental the offensive line is to the running back room. Percentage of running back runs that didn't gain yards. You put out the stats. We led 28% of our runs didn't gain yards, and we've gone over some other numbers. But on the flip side, you just put out your rankings just on Monday, and you had the Dolphins running back room ranked 5th. Now we added Ollie Gordon and Alexander Madison to Jalen Wright and Devon Achane already there. How conflicting is that for you to look at a room and be like, wow, just based on talent, that is the 5th best running back room in the NFL. And then when you flip to the offensive line and you break down the analytics, you're like, well, what good is being the 5th best talented running back room in the NFL if you're working with that? How conflicting and how frustrating is that for you as someone who's really just all about the numbers and the analytics?
That's an excellent question, because there probably are some people that are looking at the book and wondering, how's this running back room performing the way that it is statistically, as we were just discussing, if they're one of the best running back rooms in the NFL. This doesn't make a whole lot of sense. The issue is you can isolate things like, for example, we wrote in the book that if the running backs cross the line of scrimmage without being contacted, you guys are top 10. Last year, you were top 10 in terms of your yards per carry, as long as you crossed the line of scrimmage without being contacted. But you were one of the worst if you were contacted at or behind the line of scrimmage. You were 31st in terms of yards per carry. You gained 1 yard per carry if you were contacted at or behind the line of scrimmage. This is on the offensive line to open up a little bit more holes for you guys, or to give you guys a little bit of opportunity to make something happen. But from a talent perspective, and from what your running back room, I think, can deliver, I'm not massively high on Alexander Madison, but Jalen Wright, Devon Achane, like these players absolutely are the guys that can raise the ceiling for this offense. And, your passing attack was so limited in terms of the time that you had to get rid of the ball as quickly as you needed to, that you were getting a lot of impact from Achane in the passing game as well. Like as a receiver out of the backfield between Jonnu Smith and him, there were a lot of targets that were getting spread around, and he is great after the ball, after he catches the ball, or after he gets past the line of scrimmage, in terms of being able to make an explosive gain. Naturally, when, everybody loved his play was a couple of years ago when he was the change of pace back and Mostert was getting all the run. And then all of a sudden he comes in and breaks those, 16 to 20 to 30 yard rushing gains. And when he was getting the bulk of the workload, there weren't as many of those gains that were present. So his explosive rate dipped, and a lot of others metrics declined as well. But some of that was on the offensive line. Some of it is on, if you're a guy who's in the game, like there's unique Derrick Henry, for example. Derrick Henry is the type of guy who starts off games in the first half, and you can bet on longest rush over 16.5 yards. So will the player have one run during the course of a game of at least 17 yards? Derrick Henry is the type of guy who you're using him in the first quarter, he's not getting a lot of explosive gains. You're using him in the second quarter, he's not getting a lot of explosive gains. Some people are starting to get worried this guy hasn't even come close to hitting a run of even 10 yards, let alone 17. But once you get into that third and then fourth quarter, he's just worn that defense down so much that all of a sudden, boom, here comes a 35 to 60 yard run from Derrick Henry. A-Chain is different than that. You want some of those pops and bursts. He's got them at the beginning of the game when he's really fresh, and that's what we were seeing a lot more of in 2023. Those holes just weren't opening up for him in 2024. The offense was a lot more compact, predictable. It wasn't as dynamic or explosive. And so defenses were keying in on a little bit more on that. This is on Mike McDaniel as well. The GM and the front office is building the team. Mike McDaniel is calling the plays. He's got to figure out what he has to work with and figure out a way to introduce a little bit more explosiveness to that run game, figure out from a run timing perspective. Like, it's easy to say, like you and I could sit here and say the Dolphins offensive line is fifth worst. Your running backs are fifth best. Your running backs probably are going to produce a season that's somewhere middle to the lower half of the NFL simply because you're being held back by the offensive line, and just leave it at that and say, these are our expectations heading into the season. This is what it's going to be. In my opinion, though, this is where the brilliance and the fun part about coaching comes into play, because I believe coaching impacts games far more than the average person does. And yes, you're going to be limited and you have things that you have to work around, but you still can come up with something, whether it's from, like I said, a run timing perspective, a run scheme perspective, different ways to creatively call runs to try to figure out a way to get this run game back on track, because it's not going to be able to sustain enough for your offense to win games if you're delivering the same type of rushing efficiency that you delivered last season. Despite all of that, though, despite how much we've been trashing the run game over the last 10 minutes, you guys still won more games than you lost when Tua was your quarterback last year. So, like, there is some silver linings. I mentioned when I first joined you, like, there are some silver linings with this Miami Dolphins team. The offensive line is one of the massive weak links here, but there are ways that you can work around it, even if it's going to struggle this year. And that's on the coaching staff. And that's where, that's why Mike McDaniel gets paid the big bucks to come in here, use that big brain of his to figure it out.
Do you believe in Mike McDaniel?
I believed in him more. Some of these coaches, you lose a little bit of faith as the years go by. And that's inevitable as teams struggle. Some coaches you gain more faith in. Like, if you look at, I don't know if you remember back to Andy Reid, back when Andy Reid was coaching the Philadelphia Eagles, a visionary at the beginning, then was struggling to win games. They end up actually getting rid of him. He goes to Kansas City. 1 year later, they're figuring it out and they're making postseason runs. So now Andy Reid is viewed as one of the best coaches in the NFL. So it's sick. I don't want to say it's cyclical for every coach, but there's ebbs and flows to it. But right now, I would say for most people in the NFL, or most people outside the NFL studying Mike McDaniel, it's been trending downward a little bit in terms of your confidence and your faith in what he can bring to the table. So, Kyle Shanahan went through a rough year last season with injuries and winning only 6 games, and they're projected to win their division this year now and rebound. Mike McDaniel needs to deliver here. I know the Buffalo, but like for years it was New England Patriots running this division, and then the Bills came into play once Josh Allen started playing better, and then the Patriots stepped back once Tom Brady left, and the New York Jets have never been really great, during this time frame that we're talking about here, the last 7 to 10 years or so. And the Buffalo Bills have not figured it out on the defensive side of the ball, and that's Sean McDermott's specialty. You mentioned, Mike McDaniel and co delivered one of the best offensive performances a team has ever recorded against Mike McDaniel or against Sean McDermott's defense. Yeah. He's the reason that their team is being held back in my opinion, on that side of the football. Mm-hmm. While the Buffalo Bills are viewed clearly as like the best team and most likely team to win this division, and I firmly believe that as well, it's not as if that team is bulletproof, and it's not as if you guys couldn't take a step here and make something of your season and make it actually count and pay off down the stretch in terms of something in the playoffs. And that's the frustration for me, is that, yes, you want Tua to be healthy, but even when he is healthy, it's tailing off late in the season. Your home away splits late in the season are horrific. I've got the numbers right here. From December onward since 2017, when you're playing at home, you're 16-6. When you're playing on the road, you're 5-15. You can't have those types of splits. To me, that's coaching to a great degree. Is like,
I agree,
psychologically figuring it out and then out there executing. And Mike McDaniel looks cold on the sideline, and the team buys into that, and it just doesn't. They got to figure it out, man. They got to figure out. Mike McDaniel needs to figure out how to win games late in the season, and this team. It's about time for them to actually make some noise in the postseason here.
I mean, it's almost like it's bred into us. You could go back into Flores. Remember, into his rookie year, that win and get in against Buffalo. Andrew Van Ginkel was the only guy who got off the bus on either side of the football. 2021 under Brian Flores. Remember, got a win against the Titans in that late season game with the rainy conditions. Flores did a terrible job of coaching the game. Flores and Tua had a blow up in the locker room, and things just got worse. And again, it looked like Duke Johnson was the only guy who got off the field, got off the bus to play a game that week too. We can't, in these big games, we can't get everyone to show up. And if we get one unit shows up, offense shows up, defense, special teams won't show up. Defense, special teams show up, offense won't show up. We just can't get everyone working in unison. And I agree, that comes down to the coach having these guys prepared, ready, and to put it on the line. Listen, I got two things I want to quickly cover before you get out of here. There's just two of your positional rankings. And I just want to ask you something. Number one, with the secondary, you have this as a 27th ranked secondary in the NFL. Is that mainly because the corner room, and does the addition of Minkah Fitzpatrick kind of impact that ranking at all for you? And then number two, you ranked the front seven the 19th in the NFL. They added Kenneth Grant, who I think is an absolute stud. I was banging the table for since November for them to draft him. Love this kid. You add him and pair him with Sealer. If Phillips can stay healthy, if Chubb can stay healthy, and then you got Chop Robinson for another year. I see that front seven potentially being, one of the best in the AFC. Do you think that basically with your ranking, if these guys can manage to stay healthy, especially off the edge, could you see that ranking coming up higher?
So to answer your first question, I do think part of it is that cornerback play. You guys are going to be playing better quarterbacks this year. I'll talk about strength of schedule momentarily, but absolutely, Minkah coming back to Miami, he's just a little bit different than what he was when he left Miami, right? And I think there were some issues in Pittsburgh, and it's one of the reasons they decided to move him. And was it all just based on communication and younger players playing there alongside Minkah, or was his game slipping a little bit as well? So it's going to be interesting to see what he has in the tank to contribute to the Dolphins. Obviously, losing a player the caliber of Jalen Ramsey is not a positive. The front seven, I agree. There are some players there that are impactful. Losing Calais Campbell, granted, he is getting older, but he was third on the team in pressures last season. I agree. I also like Kenneth Grant as well. One of the key things that you guys are going to have to improve upon, your run defense last year. I think you ranked 8th best in the NFL last year, so you were solid. But that did come against the third easiest schedule of run offenses. This year, I'm projecting that you're going to play the 15th toughest schedule of run offenses. So moving from 30th to 15th is a big jump up in schedule difficulty that your run defense is going to have to deal with. So you guys are going to have to play even better than you did last year in order to even rank where you did last year, let alone improve over that. And then your quarterbacks, I show you going up against the 18th best schedule of opposing quarterbacks this year, 18th toughest. Last year, you played the 5th easiest, 28th. So this is going to be a step up in terms of your quarterbacks that you're going to play and the rushing offenses that you're going to play. Overall, I have you shifting from the 24th toughest schedule of offenses That's who you played last year, up to 13th toughest schedule this year. So it's going to be more difficult for your defense. I mean, if you look at last year, you and I both can like go back in time and think about this now, but you played the Cleveland Browns offense last year. You played the Raiders offense last year. You played the Titans offense last year. This team that obviously between them and the Browns had the top 2 picks in the NFL draft. You played the Colts offense last year, which was all over the place. The Texans had a down year offensively last year. You playing a rookie quarterback in Drake May a couple of times. You played, whatever Aaron Rodgers was last season. You played the worst season of the offense of the San Francisco 49ers that we've seen in several years with Kyle Shanahan. The Arizona Cardinals offense was fine last year, not great. The Seattle Seahawks offense was down a little bit. The Jacksonville Jaguars offense wasn't pretty. So a lot of these offenses that you were playing last year weren't all that great. Then you look at this year, obviously you're playing the AFC East, which they made moves at, the New England Patriots going to be theoretically better with Josh McDaniels calling your offense. Drake May in year number 2. You got them twice. You got Justin Fields in New York with a brand new coaching staff there. Maybe I don't really believe in Justin Fields, but at least you have a better, theoretically, maybe a better play caller than you did last year there. You're also going up against the AFC North, which has some good offenses, and you're going to have to play Aaron Rodgers again because now he's in Pittsburgh. The NFC South, maybe not that scary, but I do think the Tampa Bay offense and the Atlanta Falcons offense is on the rise this year. And then you've got the Commanders who were good last year. You've got the LA Chargers, Justin Herbert game against him this year, plus whatever that is that the Indianapolis Colts bring to the table. So it's a more difficult schedule for your defense this year, to be sure. And they're going to have to step up on that side of the ball because if you guys come out and you can't run the football as effectively this year, and it's harder for you to pass protect, and you're not as able to build as many of these leads in games, what will inevitably happen is you're going to be, you're going up against more difficult offenses. If your defense can't hold serve and you're allowing some points, your offense is going to be playing from behind in that second half of games. And that's where Tua will be drop back passing and is going to be very predictable in that regard. You're not going to have the same ability to run the football or try to even be balanced because of Tua having to pass the ball so much. So the run game might not be as impactful. You're going to be predictable. That's pass rush season for your opponents. And I'm trying to pull up here some quick stats at the very end of the chapter. I have my stats on first drives of games. And last year, yards per play, you guys were 24th on your first drive of the game. In all first half drives, you ranked 28th in yards per play, 26th in EPA per play, 30th in rate of scoring touchdowns, 24th in points per drive. So I'm just rolling through a ton of these statistics that are showing your first half offense last year was terrible. Yes, I know Tua wasn't out there for 100% of the games, but in 2023, it was one of the best first half offenses. You had one of the best scripts. You ranked number 1 in terms of yards per play on your first drive of the game and in all drives in the first half. You ranked top 5 in terms of touchdown rate in the first half of games. And so you were able to get points on the board and allow your run game to stay involved and make life a little bit easier on your defense. This is a Mike McDaniel stat. Mike McDaniel has to come up with better scripts early in games to build leads faster so that your run game can still be impactful in the second half so that life is easier on your defense. If you guys play in the first half and on the first drive of games like you did last year with Mike McDaniel's offense, it's going to be uphill sledding all second half, and it's not going to look pretty.
As you're rifling off those numbers, all I could think about is this is a further indictment on Mike McDaniel because you said the key word script. Those scripted drives, that's what you're practicing all week through walkthroughs, et cetera, et cetera. When you're not executing on the most scripted drives and the most scripted plays of the game, that's a coaching and that's a fundamental issue right there. Man, listen, Warren, I appreciate your time and you taking out some time to join us. It was absolute blast to talk some ball with you. Can you please go ahead and tell everyone where they can find you? Again, plug that preview. People, you got to check it out. Like, it will make you a smarter and more intellectual Miami Dolphin fan heading into this year. It's so in depth. Again, I was reading it before we hopped on here. It's absolutely fantastic work. You guys all need to check it out. So go ahead, Warren, the floor is yours. Plug what you got going on and where people can find you.
Yeah, head over to sharp.football. If you just plug that into your URL, you will get redirected to the page that you can buy the book. You'll see that the price is $30. That's what we're selling the PDF for. But enter the code Dolphins and you'll get the book for just $1. And you're not going to find a better way to use that money than on this book right now, and do that today because it's not going to be here forever. But it's definitely a great resource, and it'll arm you with some knowledge about Tua that you might not have known before. It'll give you some things to be worried about for the Dolphins this year, but it'll also give you a lot of ammo that you can use to defend your quarterback and your team when you're talking ball with some of the other fan bases out there. So just a lot about the Miami Dolphins, and as you mentioned earlier, a lot about the other teams that you guys are going to play that you can use as some scouting as you're thinking about those opponents every single week. So it's great for Miami Dolphins fans for sure. Put a lot of time, worked on this book for 3 months, and really happy to have it in your guys' hands now. So go check it out.
Appreciate you, Warren. As always, guys, please smash the like button. Subscribe if you are new. And until next time, you already know what time it is. Fins up. We'll see you on the next one.